John, we got Adam on the line. What do you want to ask him?
In a given day, how much my time should I be spending on raising capital?
Let me go through the order of what I think the real true operations are. Find your market. Number 2, find your team. Step 3 would probably be to raise the money. Step 4 would be to start calling brokers, and step 5 to close on the deal. So my opinion for you in particular is if you have 3 times the amount of money that you need right now, you can just keep those relationships going while putting your main effort at finding the deal. If you don't have 3x a down payment, I think you need to just only raise capital.
Hey, I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this podcast is different from everything else out there. I bring together new and aspiring investors on each and every episode and let the aspiring investors ask the questions that they need answered. And if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you probably have the same questions. So before you get to this episode that we have prepared for you, make sure you hit the subscribe button and that little notification bell to make sure you get notified every time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe, and I'm very excited for today's show. Super excited, which is, a little bit more than normal excitement level that I come on with because I've got 2 guys that I've known for quite a while. We've got the one and only Adam AAA Adams and John Manfredy. And so, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hey.
All right. And as is tradition, the experienced investor gets first shot at everything. So Adam, you're going to be in the hot seat first. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Good seeing you again, by the way. And how's the weather on the other side of the mountains?
The weather's good. The weather's perfect. I just got back from a trip to Moab where it was super hot, but I smashed my fingers in a jeeping accident.
Oh man. Yeah. Moab's a great place. They got a couple of Jeep trails. I've been there I've got some scars still, right here. This is Slick Rock. You probably can't see it very well, but I still have a scar right there from Slick Rock.
Nice.
So when were you in Moab?
It was just this weekend. Okay.
I was on, do you know where Hatch, Utah is? It's not very far from Moab. It's the other side of the state.
So is it closer to St. George?
Closer to Cedar.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I know where Cedar City is.
Yeah. So we were about 50 miles east of Cedar, which, same ballpark. So Anyway, cool. We were fairly close to each other for a bit, but anyway, that's not super important, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
Cool. Well, I'm into mountain biking, jeeping, been doing real estate since 2005. In many ways, it's been a part-time thing for me. And then during 2015, 16, 17, 18, and 19, it was my only thing. So just did syndication full time for a few years. We got up to 6 assets and we sold 3 of them. So we've got three different properties. It's only like 280 doors now, but that, and I started a podcast agency in the end of 2019. So approximately 3 years ago. So that's a little bit about me. I come from Utah originally, and I'm living in Colorado.
Nice. Now let's dive in there a little bit. One thing I do want to talk about is the podcast, because a lot of people, when they start multifamily, it's one way to get your name out there. And before your podcast agency, you had a pretty good podcast yourself on real estate. Let's do this. First, talk about what the benefits are of having a podcast as a syndicator. And then I'd love you to tell us about your podcast agency.
Yeah, absolutely. Benefits as a syndicator. You mentioned it briefly there as well. If you are syndicating, your main goal is to bring on passive investors. It means you ran out of money. Doesn't mean you're not rich, but you ran out of capital on your own, and you still need to partner with other people to do the deals. And it's kind of cool because it's beneficial to, utilize OPT or OPM, depending on what side you are. Those passive investors are there to do the OPT, leverage your time. And as you create content on your podcast, you can add more value to those people that are your perfect person that you want to work with. For example, engineers, doctors, pilots, whomever it is, if you want to add value to them so that they can think of you first when they're going to be passive investing, a podcast is one of the best ways. I love podcasts because not only Are you adding value and attracting that person? But they're likely to share it with their friends. And so you really grow your influence even when you're sleeping, which
Yeah.
is, why we invest in apartments,
Mhm.
because we can grow our nest egg even when we're asleep.
Yeah.
The podcast can be a really easy way to record it once and leave it out there for years and years and years and keep getting in front of your people, grow that influence, and have people talking about you when you're not in the room in a good
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, and I'll tell you from my experience, I think this is going to be right around episode 310. So I've recorded several of them, but I've had several people come in as potential passive investors. When we finally get on a phone call to start talking about it, they say, "I feel like I know you already because I've listened to your podcast," and that's huge in building rapport, and it really is a relationship game. And so if they feel like they know you, they're much more likely to invest with you. All right. And one thing that I will mention, that Adam, that you definitely brought up, is you've got to make sure your avatar is right. You got to make sure your podcast speaks to your avatar. Can you go a little deeper into that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because there's a ton of syndicators that have come to me to get a little bit of advice. And the big thing that I feel like a broken record sometimes, because I do
Mhm.
mention it quite a bit, is that they don't understand who their avatar is.
Mhm.
So you asking this question is phenomenal. There's a lot of people that say, my avatar is both the operator and the passive investor. And what ends up happening is they're adding value to like the operators, and then they're adding value to the passive investors. But on both sides, the operator and the passive investor both will say, I'm not sure if this is really for me, because
Mhm.
it does too much for that other person.
Yeah.
It half the time it helps that other person. So maybe I shouldn't listen anymore.
Yep.
Niching down and just doing one thing. When you figure out that perfect avatar, we mentioned doctors, we mentioned engineers, we mentioned pilots. Once we figure that person out, who they are, what they're looking for, how many kids they have, what part of the country they live in, what they're worried about, what their goals are, what keeps them up at night. And when we try to figure all those things out, we can really identify that avatar, and it
Mhm.
helps us put out the right type of content,
Yep.
asking the right questions, for example, having the right guests on your show as another great example. And so many, many, many people that are joining the podcasting space and our syndicators,
Mhm.
they add too much value to other syndicators
Mhm.
instead of their passive investor. And then that just means that they're not actually attracting the passive investor.
Yep.
Whereas we can switch it around. And for example, instead of maybe asking, this might not pertain to your show, but there's a lot of shows out there.
Mhm.
So instead of asking a question like, how did you raise the capital? For example, this is a big
Mhm.
one. How did you raise $3 million? That's amazing.
Yep.
Well, the passive investor doesn't care how to raise the money.
No.
They want to know how to be safely invested in the money with their money. And so they want to figure out stuff like, how do I vet an operator? How do I know if a deal is right? How do I
Mhm.
underwrite a deal as a passive investor?
Yeah.
These are a few topics that benefit your avatar if it's a passive investor and your main goal is to make
Mhm.
money. Now, if you got a coaching program, then you probably want to do more of the helping operators versus helping passive investors, because now you can teach and coach and mentor people that want to get in and do what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. And incidentally, my avatar is on the podcast with us today. So my avatar is the aspiring investor, and we have gotten investors out of this podcast, but I look at that more as icing on the cake. We actually had most people who listen to this podcast are aspiring investors like John or any of the other people who've sat in that seat over the last 300 episodes. It was something that we realized up front, that if we had a podcast about syndication, would draw more syndicators. And in fact, that's exactly what we wanted, because I want more people into my tribe. I want more people to come into our circle who are syndicators, to help other people get deals done. That was our thoughts on that. Now, I understand right now you have the podcast on podcasting, which I somehow I was completely oblivious to that until I saw someone else post about it. But in addition to that, I know you have a podcast service. Can you talk a little bit about the podcast service for anybody who might be interested in that?
It's called Grow Your Show,
Mm-hmm.
growyourshow.com, easy to find. And basically our main focus is trying to help somebody who's busy doing their own thing already.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to figure out all the hard things. We make it as easy as them pressing record, and we handle everything else.
Mm-hmm.
To give you a couple of examples of that, it will download it from the internet where it'll already be after they press record. We'll edit it. We'll write the show notes. We'll also title it with a great title that's catchy. And then we end up creating promotional images. We email your guest for you, so you don't never have to follow up with your guest. We'll email them all the promo images so they can share it. And basically everything else. We do marketing, we do advertising, we do SEO, but basically just handle it, the whole end of it. So most of our clients, they're not big tech savvy people. They're business people, and they want to stay in their lane. And so we are able to serve them. The podcast is just called The Podcast on Podcasting. I call it POP for short, POP. And Podcast on Podcasting is a free, easy resource to kind of learn a little bit. There's tons of episodes, not as many as Brian has, but we're not far behind, maybe 100 less. So
yeah, well, I think I had a little bit of a head start on you. So when I started this podcast, you were still doing, I think you're still doing the Creative Real Estate Show. But I think if you would add all your podcast episodes up, you're still miles ahead of me.
maybe
probably got a lot
around
more downloads
800
too.
total. I think we had 600 on the one, and we're like maybe around 250 on the new one.
If you're thinking about starting a podcast, I'll say I put in at least 100 hours of research on where to list the podcast. Am I going to use Buzzsprout? I do use Buzzsprout, or any of the other listing services. How to get on Apple Podcasts, how to get on Google, how to get on Spotify. And then just the editing. I started out editing myself, and oh my gosh, that took a ridiculous amount of time. I think I probably spent almost a 3-to-1 ratio on 3 minutes editing for every 1 minute of content when I started out. Had I a do-over button, and if I could rewind 2.5 years ago when I started this, my do-over button would have been find somebody like Adam and just say, hey, look, you know what, take care of all of this. All I want to do is get on the line and talk. Have somebody handle everything else. Anyway, very, very much appreciate what you do for podcasters. And I know several people who use your service, and they all rave about it. That said, let's talk a little more about real estate. This is the apartment investing show. It's not the podcast on podcasting. So tell us a little bit about some of the properties that you've done, or how about this? Pick your favorite, and just do a little bit of a deep dive on one of the multifamily properties you guys have.
Yeah, definitely. There's only a few to pick from. We've done 6 larger ones, 6 syndications. Over the years, we've done quite a few others. But the one that I would like to bring up is one that we almost did, but didn't end up closing. Sometimes the best deals are the ones that you don't do. I had my perfect avatar, by the way, Siva Venugopalan. Siva always said, because his son is in the military, I think he was one of those parachuters. And he says, Dad, I'd rather be down on the ground and looking up and seeing something maybe happen than in the airplane when something's going to happen. It's like you may as well not do some of them. So the one that I wanted to mention is, we were going to co-GP. We've closed our own on just 2 of those. And then the rest we were co-GP. Basically, either somebody else found the deal and we raised some of the money, just a mixture, a combination of different things. On one of these, somebody else had a deal. They brought us in. We had raised our full amount. Later on, found out that somebody on the general partnership, and this is a company that's well known, that maybe they've been on your show or some other apartment investing shows around, and not very many people know this. And I did not do this. I didn't do my own due diligence on the guy. But on my podcast, the Creative Real Estate Podcast, which I sold a couple of years ago, one of my passive investors actually listens to the podcast and started listening and found out exactly how to vet an operator. And I missed the step completely. And my passive investor was just doing their normal due diligence that I tell them to do. And he found out that one of the main general partners who hid themselves a couple of layers deep through an LLC that owns an LLC that owns an LLC had a major SEC violation.
Oh,
So
wow.
basically, they've stolen millions of dollars from past investors in the
Mhm.
past, and they tried to hide it. And I didn't ever see it, and I was quite embarrassed. And I had to let people know, and I had to give money back. It just goes to show that we need to be doing our due diligence, because this person was really well known, been on lots of different podcasts and taken coaching programs from some of the
Mhm.
best. And so you just never would have expected that he would have such a major security violation that he's not allowed to do any syndication anymore. But luckily, we backed out of that one, lost a couple hundred grand,
Mhm.
but of our own money through acquisition fees and things like that. But it was the right thing to do. And hopefully, somebody listening doesn't have to lose that much money, because now they know they can just do the due diligence ahead of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I was actually explaining to somebody last night that we were talking about a very specific deal that they have under contract. And, I told her the worst case scenario is we do this deal and it ends up being a bad deal. She was saying, okay, worst case scenario is we close. And I'm like, yeah, or we don't close. And my point was, no, worst case scenario is we do close and this ends up being a bad deal. Like that's even worse than not closing on this deal. Started to explain why, but I think you're absolutely right. If you can avoid a bad deal, it's worth losing money on. It really is, because you've got your reputation on the line, you've got your investors' money on the line, and a lot of times your own money on the line. You can lose more by a bad deal than you can by pulling out and losing an earnest money deposit or what have you. That said, one of my favorite questions, shifting gears a tiny bit, one of my favorite questions to ask everybody is about motivations. Kind of helps me, peek inside your soul, so to speak. So what is your big burning why? What drives you to be successful?
The big thing I would say is that passive income makes a huge difference.
Mhm.
Residual income makes a huge difference. So when I was growing up, my stepdad always used to say that I need to read Rich Dad Poor Dad. We always
Mhm.
played cash flow. To give you a bit of background, when I grew up, we had rentals all over the place, multifamily, single family, condos, land, agricultural land that for development,
Nice.
self-storage units. My stepdad he did all of those things. And I
Mhm.
grew up snow plowing them with the four-wheeler or shoveling the sidewalks, trimming trees during the summer,
Mhm.
watering trees. This was a big thing that my dad just basically taught me that I had to do it, and it was the normal way. And I realized after selling the first deal, I got a deal in 2005 that I sold a couple years later while I was still in college. And I
Mhm.
made more on that deal than I would make in working for 9 or 10 months after graduating.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, real estate is so powerful. So that's when I got into a multifamily. I actually read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad
Mhm.
and studied Robert Kiyosaki a little bit more probably than most people do. And I even went to one of his conferences, met him and his team in Salt Lake City,
Mhm.
at the top of the Wells Fargo building back in like 2007, I think it was.
Mhm.
And point being that as I studied Robert, I found that he made as much money as he could in his business,
Mhm.
got all the tax write-offs, and he invested everything else directly as a passive investor with somebody else so that he could be growing both things at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's been my motivation, is to do what my dad did, to do what Robert Kiyosaki did, and to just be able to kind of chill.
Mhm.
I didn't hurt my hand all that long ago, but it's been really cool because over the last week or so, I haven't had to. I mean, I'm good. I
Yeah.
don't have to type on my keyboard. And so it's been pretty cool to just kind of see it come to fruition, where
Mhm.
you have the time freedom and the ability to take off, and whether it's a hand, a
Mhm.
death, a vacation, COVID, you
Yeah.
name it. It's just nice to be able to know that you're taken care of.
I would say that your Jeep excursion last week was probably made possible by a lot of your passive investments. So just the fact that you were down in Moab, and I know you spent a couple of I'm good friends with somebody that I know goes with you occasionally. So every once in a while I hear, hey, I was in Moab with Adam last week, or I was snowboarding or whatever. I would say that residual passive income helps you to live the lifestyle, that you do live, and that's amazing. So. Anyway, so last question for you before we bring John on. Adam, what's next for you?
Yeah, we stopped doing acquisitions only because I was in a crash in 2008, 9, 10, 11. I lost an apartment. I have been owning apartments that long, but I lost one. And so I started to kind of sit back at the end of 19 when I decided to start this other thing. So I'm fully anticipating, and I have been for several years now, that in 2023, 2024 will be in full acquisition mode, and probably like to get a couple thousand doors in a short amount of time. We have everything around that we need to do that. And until then, I'll just keep running my podcast agency, Grow Your Show, and just helping other people and finding some passive investments.
Yeah. I am very, very anxious for these rates to come back down. And I'm actually very happy buying at the higher interest rates right now, because there's less competition. You can get better deals. And I think interest rates are going to come crashing down 2023 and maybe 24. And then we'll refinance the stuff that we have and just keep on buying. And I agree. I think there's going to be a lot of buying opportunities ahead, and we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg right now. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. Did you get Robert Kiyosaki on your investor list so he can start passively investing with you?
I haven't. No, that's funny. Back then, when I met him and his team, I didn't even think about it. I didn't consider it.
Yeah,
I
wouldn't
didn't know what I was going to do.
Yeah,
but nowadays, I guess I'm kicking myself. Thank you for pointing that out.
No worries. So next time you meet him, just, make sure you're checking the boxes, hey, can I have your email address? I'd like to send you a couple of my OMs, but all right. Well, let's once again, another shift gears transition point. Here we come with our aspiring investor today. So John, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian, how you doing? Long time no see.
Good to see you again.
It's been a full 2 weeks.
It's been 2 weeks. And before that, it was, 3 weeks. So
then it was a year at in Dallas.
Dallas, yeah. So anyway, good to have you on the show finally, and thanks for spending some time with us today.
Thanks for having me. This is my very first podcast.
Oh,
I can't say I listen to podcasts much. I'm more of a YouTuber and LinkedIn guy, but happy to join aboard.
The great thing is we have a YouTube channel as well, and this podcast will be on the YouTube channel. So you'll be able to share that with all your friends and your network, and even watch it yourself. So
awesome.
But there you go. So do us a favor, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a retired architect. COVID forced my hand, and I lost my job in 2020. I used to a while back, several years ago, I used to be a design architect for Crate and Barrel, and then I started my own technology company around 2000. Did that for about 15 some odd years, and went back into architecture afterwards. Then COVID struck and took my source of income. And at that point, my wife and I decided not to go back to work and chase the dream of real estate investing, something I've dabbled with for better part of 20 years, but haven't really gone into it head on because of work.
Now, I really like to dive into these transition points, so let's rewind the clock, when your wife and your wife collectively decided not to go back to work, what were the major factors that led towards that decision?
Well, Jill is, she's a phenomenal career coach. She's one of the many hats she wears, and she knows me, I've known her for 12 years,
Mhm.
and she knows me very well, and we've had several conversations about our future, and our plans for that future and how to realize those plans. And she mentioned the fact that when I was thinking about returning to the workforce in architecture and doing that type of job again, she's like, well, you've been talking about this real estate thing forever, John. I'm kind of a student of real estate, and things happen. Life happens, right? You got kids, you've got a full-time job. Architecture is a lot of work. 60,
Yep.
70-hour weeks. Don't have much bandwidth left for the kids and family. And she's like, you're not going to have this time again. This is a special point in time where you have the space to do this. We're fine. She works as well, and she's got a great career. And we've got our house, we've got our kids, we've got our health. What more can we ask for?
Yeah.
Do it, because she knows I'm very driven and focused on goals I chase. And she convinced me, and we talked about it. Like, yeah, I don't need to go back. I need to be unemployed. That's what I need to do.
Yeah.
I've been unemployed for a year and a half. I still teach part-time, but it's not. It just keeps the lights on.
Yeah. I guess I'm unemployed too. That's a nice place to be. I'm self-employed, and
Well,
going back to Robert Kiyosaki model, I'm trying to move from that self-employed quadrant over to the B and the I quadrant. So I think I'm 1 foot in more than 1 foot in self-employed quadrant right now. But
Right.
so and then why did you choose multifamily for the next part of your life, or the next income producing part?
Well, when I first, when I went into unemployment, I started searching. Well, okay, I'm going to do this real estate thing. I'm doing full time, so I started chasing your traditional low hanging fruit. What is the easiest thing I can wrap my head around? And that's single family homes.
Yep.
There's a crushing demand for housing in the U.S. as a result of the crash back in 07, 08. So I started looking at, getting into residential house flipping, put some business in houses, kept losing to some competition. I felt very alone. It's a very dog eat dog world out there, that type of space. And then as I researched more about it, I realized it didn't have the scale I was after. It felt like a full-time job. And so I started researching different thought leaders and different avenues. And I guess I had limiting beliefs back then. I was like, God, I can't buy an apartment building. I don't know how to get up to that level. I don't have the funds to buy a 100-unit building. It was daunting, but I got some education behind it, some training. I got some skills I needed regarding the financial instruments used to evaluate deals and make them attractive to investors. And then coming out of that training program, you've gone down a similar path. I felt I had the tools that I needed to, with confidence, chase this idea, this dream. And so I've been running with it ever since. I started in the fall of last year, haven't looked back, and keep pressing forward, trying to get my first deal done eventually.
Awesome.
Working on it now, actually.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question. I think you've already made a lot of, you've already talked a lot about your motivations and the reasons why, but if you could just state very clearly, or as clear as you can, what is your big burning why?
Why I'm doing this? I want to control my time. Back when I originally left the profession, I started my own business, and I had it, for a good 15 some odd years. And, although it didn't create the financial windfall that I had envisioned, it gave me complete freedom. 2-hour lunches, leave work early. No, I mean, my deadlines were my own, of my own making. And I'm a hard worker. But, leave, spend time with kids, take days off of work when I needed to, address family issues. There was never this burden to have to make somebody else money. I did it for myself and my family. So I wanted my time back. And this time around, I wanted my time back in addition to financial freedom. I wanted not to have to worry about your typical burden of bills and what have you, and not being able to afford certain aspects of life that you want to enjoy.
Yeah.
I want that now, and it can be achieved now, and that's what I'm after. I really want to control my time. I've got a 5-month-old, I've got a 4-year-old, and a 14-year-old daughter, and seeing them every morning throughout the day, taking breaks with them. It's been amazing. I can't get that time back if I'm working for somebody else.
Love it. I love it. Well, here comes my favorite part of the show, where I get to sit back and watch the show. But here it goes. John, we got Adam on the line. What do you want to ask him?
Adam, hello, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
It's great to hear your story and see that you really only started 5 years ago, but you've done quite well for yourself in that short amount of period of time. And I'm just getting off the ground myself. I'm working on my first deal. I'm spending a lot of my time networking with brokers, visiting properties. I do a lot of due diligence myself. I underwrite deals. And then in the evening, I wind up connecting with investors and networking and growing my pool of people that I know. In a given day, how much my time should I be spending on raising capital? Now Brian had a good talk a couple weeks back about this.
Yeah.
I'd like to get your opinions. As a percentage, what would be, for a beginner, what should be a modest amount of time I should spend doing this work?
It's tough because every beginner starts at a different place. There is one thing to maybe mention is I believe it's a team sport. So when I was acquisition mode, we had one person who was only in acquisitions. They basically spent 40 hours a week on trying to get more deals under contract. Another person was basically part-time, 20 hours a week in underwriting only. That's the only thing that they would do is underwrite deals. There would be an asset manager who basically worked full-time. And then I was money raising and I was basically full-time. So for us, it was 3.5 full-time jobs to do the business. We all worked quite a bit. And so if you're on your own, I assume you're by yourself completely?
No, I've got a team.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
What do they do? Do you mind if I ask before answering?
One person researches the market in terms of which are the best appropriate management companies to work with. She does interviews with them. She talks to them at length about the properties we're looking at and getting a grip on what the expenses might look like for the properties that we come across our desk.
Okay.
Another gentleman does a lot of demographic research on the areas, making sure that the areas will support the rents that we're after. If we're doing new construction, the area will support, the price points that we're after. So a lot of that kind of background, demographic data work. Another person, he's kind of our AP on the deal. He's a local guy. He has a full-time W-2 job. He has very limited time and access to do the work I'm doing. He doesn't have multifamily. I love multifamily, and so he's having me bring in deals to the team really to share and discuss. Another guy also has a full-time job, but he has a development company. We're trying to get into development and value add acquisitions as well. We've been chasing both. He has limited time, but he's got the bandwidth to give us a few hours per week for our meetings to discuss properties and the properties we're after. And then the rest of the time is underwriting and talking to brokers and evaluating buildings, which is my kind of bag. Maybe I need more team members. I don't know. But I'm like, everyone's talking about capital raising. I'm like, well,
so my answer would be, and probably for you in particular, and maybe a lot of people listening, is that I think that raising the money is step one. It's one of the very first steps. Well, let me go through the order of what I think the real true operations are. Find your market, select a market, make sure it's the right market. Number 2, find your team. Once you have your team all set aside, you know who's going to manage, you know who's going to do this and that. Those 2 things need to get out of the way. Step 3 would probably be to raise the money. You haven't, in my opinion, you're not calling brokers yet because you don't have the full. You should probably get 3x a down payment before ever looking at a deal. It helps a lot because I've seen too many people try to get deals, but they can't raise the money and they'll actually lose the deal and lose the earnest money because they've went out of this order of operations. They've started looking for deals, but they weren't ready. They went ready, fire, aim, thinking the universe would automatically provide. The money would automatically come, but I think it's much better to go ready, aim, fire, have all the capital, and you feel better. You feel better when you talk to the brokers. The brokers care about you more. They believe in you more because you let them know you've got 3 times what the down payment is here. All you need is the deal. And now they feel a lot more comfortable to send you the better deals instead of the deals that a million people have seen already and passed on.
Yep.
And then step 4 would be, I think if I'm doing it correctly, step 4 would be to start calling brokers, and step 5 to close on the deal.
Yep.
So it's a little bit backwards, I think, from what most people would say, because they've heard if you find them a good deal, the money automatically comes. They think because I need to have a deal before I can do anything, they go for talking to those brokers first, and then they get kind of stuck and perhaps lose their earnest money. So my opinion for you in particular is if you have 3 times the amount of money that you need right now, you can just keep those relationships going while while putting your main effort at finding the deal. If you don't have 3x a down payment today, then I think you need to just only raise capital.
Yep.
And the best way to do that, Michael Blanc has a thing called a sample deal package. We have one as well, but we just create a sample deal, and you use the 2 things that that step 1 and step 2. You use the market that you're going to be in, and you use the team that you're in, and all of that is on the sample deal. And then you just start having conversations with past investors where you say, if I find a deal like this, how soon can you jump in and how much do you want to do? Yep. And once you have 3 times the down payment, and there's a reason for that, then you can start looking for the deal. The reason why it's 3x a down payment is because you're going to need 1.5 to 2 times the down payment in order to make a deal cross the finish line, because you need money to stay in the bank, you need rehab costs, things like this. And many of your investors back out last minute.
Yeah.
And so it's just smart to have 3x ready to go and then start going to that next part.
Yeah. I love that answer. And I think, John, I mean, we talked 2 weeks ago and you heard me say something very similar.
Yeah.
I think I was so bold to say that the biggest lie in the education industry is if you find a deal, the money will come. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And find the market, find the team, raise the capital, find the deal, and close. I think those are really, really solid steps for anybody to follow.
How do you raise capital if you don't have a deal?
What are you
talking? You're talking about actually acquiring money from these people and sitting in a bank account. You're talking about just somebody having conversations.
No, if you had a fund, you could do it that way. And you could even take deposits. You could say, hey, I need 10%. And you need to keep the rest aside, especially if you're doing a fund.
Yeah.
But what we're looking for is a pre-commitment. A soft commitment might be what others call it, but to me, I don't let this be soft. I avoid the people that are soft. So basically, I'll just say, hey, when I have a deal that looks like this, are you in? And they say, yeah. I say, okay, for how much? And they say $100,000. Then I say, just to make sure the deals do close fast. So sometimes we only have 2 weeks to make the decision. You might be out of town. You might be doing this. You might be doing that. You might have just invested with your son, your daughter. You might have paid for college. How do I know that I can count on you for the 100? I let them answer. I ask them to sell themselves on the deal. And then they'll start saying, well, Adam, everybody talks about you. I really want to work with you. Well, John, I love your background. We connect because I was doing the same thing that you're doing. And I feel like if I'm going to invest with anybody, I want to invest with you. So then John goes, all right, well, if you're saying 100,000, if this happens 3 months from now, are you still going to have that 100 totally liquid and available? And is that a small amount to you where you still have what you want left aside? Then they give you the answer, and you write it down as a pre-commitment. And you can even get them to sign it if you want, but you just write it down as a pre-commitment, and you tell them, you say, Sarah, thank you for your commitment. I double checked, I triple checked that you were in. I am actually going to write you in here, and you'll get first. You'll be first chance to get this, because I've got you as committed to jumping into that next deal at 100,000. Then you write it down, you put the date on it, and whenever it happens, Sarah, great news. We started looking for deals. We found an amazing deal. It's just like the one that we talked about, except the unit mix is slightly different, but it's in the same area. The ROI is actually a little bit better for you. And we're going to be closing this. We need all the money in there within the next 2 weeks, and want to make sure that you're still committed to being part of this deal, so that you can. And then you finish their sentence, what they told you, their why a long time ago. Because when you were on the phone with Sarah the first time, you asked her, why do you want to invest at all? Why do you want to invest with me? And she told you that she liked you. She resonated with you. She told you that she wanted her daughter to be able to go to college to take after her. And now you just say, I'm so excited because I got something that meets your criteria. It's going to help you, Sarah. It's what you wanted, and you've already committed to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom with that strategy. On my first couple of deals, we had a lot of investors back out. A couple of key things that I'll point out is he asked them, is the money liquid? We had a couple of people who had misunderstandings on retirement. They heard, oh, I can use my retirement funds to invest. Awesome. And when it came time to wire money, it's like, oh, I have to have a self-directed retirement account to do this. Oh, shoot. Or we had one case that the very first person, and I had him fill out a soft committal form, for $50,000. What I didn't ask him is, are you going to be ready to deploy this immediately? His money was in equity in a house that he was planning on selling, so there's a lot of wisdom to how he laid that out. And I love the process. You get them to pre-commit, you talk to them about where the money is right now. Hey, it could be 1 month, it could be 3 months. Are you still going to be able to do this 3 months from now? That's going to make your dropout rate almost zero when you get to it. I think one of the biggest problems new syndicators have is they get these soft commits, and when they go to collect the money, it's like, well, I had $1 million pre-committed and I collected 150. It's like, Anyway, appreciate that. Well, just looking at the clock now, oh my goodness, we are pretty much out of time already. That said, one final question for each of you. Adam, you go first. How can listeners learn more about you?
GrowYourShow.com or the apartment, podcast on podcast. I love apartments too.
Yeah. I mean, you've had, let's see, the creative real estate show, the apartment investing show as well, right?
Yeah, the apartment investing show is still up. I don't think we published an episode for a few weeks, but it's still going.
Okay. And then the Grow Your Podcast on podcasting. So all that stuff's going to be in the show notes, and you'll be able to learn more about Adam. John, same question for you. How can listeners learn more about you?
Well, I am interested in new developments and value add deals in the Midwest, and I can be found on LinkedIn. And I'm sure Brian will include the spelling of my name in your show notes on YouTube. Yep,
we'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile. We'll go one step above that, so they can just
appreciate it.
Yeah, just take all that fat fingering and typos out of it. So anyway, thanks so much for coming on the show today. If you're listening and not watching, Adam just put his broken gimpy fingers up on the screen, made me laugh. You did air quotes at one point, when you were talking, and I almost laughed out loud because you got the three fingers, bandaged up pretty well. But that was the funkiest air quote I've ever seen. I didn't even notice
that.
So
I didn't even realize I did that.
Yeah, I saw it, and I had to smother my laughter because you were on a roll. But anyway, appreciate you guys for coming on the show today, and hopefully we'll talk to both of you soon.
Appreciate it.
Hey, if you like that episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community, the Tribe of Titans, yet, you are missing out. So get yourself 30 days free by clicking the link below in the description, or go to thetribeoftitans.info, and we'll see you there.